Welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show, where trusted leaders bring biblical insights to important issues to help you stand for truth and effect godly change in our nation and in our world.
Welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show. I'm Richard Harris, and so glad that you're watching today. You and I, who have been alive in the last 10 years, although everybody in America today, have lived through one of the greatest episodes of corruption and human rights abuses the world has ever seen. I'm referring to the COVID-19 pandemic and the government response to it. It's been 4 years since we heard the famous words from the White House, "It's going to take 2 weeks to slow the spread." And they began to announce lockdowns, mandatory masks, and eventually mandatory vaccines. What happened during the COVID pandemic is it's actually an atrocity committed against the human race that should never be forgotten. Unless you think I'm exaggerating, let me remind you, 7 million people died around the world from the COVID-19 virus. We now know, we were originally told, one of many lies that came from our government and from the medical profession and the health industry. We were told from the beginning that the virus was naturally occurring. And anyone who suspected that it might be coming from the Chinese government was called racist and xenophobic. It was later demonstrated through an analysis of the DNA in the virus that it was absolutely man-made and that it came from the Chinese Wuhan laboratory. Far beyond anything we could ever imagine. We could never imagine that the American government might actually be complicit in the manufacture of this deadly vaccine. But it also came out later that the United States of America was funding the research in the Wuhan lab. We paid for the creation of a deadly vaccine that killed millions of people. You know, in addition to the virus itself, the United States government paid billions and billions of dollars to pharmaceutical companies to rush manufacture experimental concoctions, which they called vaccines, but were not really vaccines. They set aside normal protocols, mandatory testing regimen to make sure that these injections were safe for people. They issued waivers, federal government waivers of liability for these drug makers, saying no matter who dies, no matter how bad it is, no one can sue you for what you've done. We saw massive and horrible adverse effects from the vaccines. But once again, the government, the health industry, and the medical profession lied to us, saying, no, these things are safe and they're effective. And they were telling us over and over again, no, there's no proof that these things that you're seeing, these things you're experiencing, are actually coming from the vaccines. Oh, all these young people, these athletes you see dropping dead on the playing field. Oh, these comedians and actors and others who are out on stage, and the next thing you know, they're keeled over dead from an unknown cause. No, that's not the vaccine. There's no proof of that. Oh, your friends and neighbors that suddenly develop cancer and pass away after getting the vax. Oh, there's no proof of that. Oh, the increase in miscarriages, the sudden onset of autoimmune disorders, the brain problems, the neurological problems. No, pay no attention. That's not from the vaccine. And then we saw the great social media giants, Google, Facebook, what was then Twitter, and all the rest begin to censor what they called misinformation of people who were bringing forward information linking the vaccines to the troubling information, to the adverse side effects. You saw how that the government told us that, those reports that you're hearing of common medications working to prevent COVID, like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, well, yeah, they've been around for a long time, but they're not safe. You can't trust them. They're a problem. Oh, they're much more dangerous than the vaccine itself. And remember how they told us that the vaccines were safe and effective and how you had to take them because, to do so meant, to not do so means you don't love your neighbor. Do you remember that? And it turns out, though, that the vaccines weren't even effective, that they didn't prevent the acquisition of COVID-19 by and large. The effects, whatever preventative effects they had, wore off after a short amount of time. People had to take a second and a third vaccine, which also did not work. And people of good faith and reasonable minds all over the world, all over America, began to wonder, what is going on? Where is this coming from? How about the lockdowns? All over America and all over the world, really, governments in lockstep, in some bizarre, strange lockstep fashion, without question, suddenly all governments around the world, except for Sweden, were mandating things that had never been mandated before at the same time. Shutting down businesses, declaring by fiat what an essential service was and what was not. And what were they calling essential services? Well, big businesses were okay. Things like Home Depot and Lowe's and, your Costco's and things like that. Big box stores, they can stay open because they're essential. But all the mom and pop businesses, the small businesses, the restaurants, the Main Street businesses, you got to shut down. And you know else who needs to shut down? Churches. Oh, churches, you're the worst. Do you remember? Because they said, especially if you're singing, because if you sing in church, you're transmitting COVID. But you know what? They let stay open places like gambling casinos, pot shops, strip clubs, and those critically necessary abortion clinics. Guys, eventually the United States Supreme Court, with justices appointed by Donald Trump, said this whole lockdown regime is a violation of the First Amendment. You can't force churches to stay closed. But there was a period of time that passed between the lockdown orders and the Supreme Court hearing the case where thousands of churches in America closed their doors for good. Pastors were being thrown in jail. You remember Rodney Howard-Browne and others? Fined millions of dollars. Many pastors in California were fined for every single person who went into their church during the lockdown period. They fined them $5,000 or $1,000. These fines ran up to be in the millions of dollars until the Supreme Court intervened. Many pastors didn't know how they were going to continue. Thank God for those brave ones who did. Then we began to hear things out of the World Health Organization where they said things like, COVID it's a tragedy, but you know what? It's really a great opportunity. Opportunity for what? For them to implement elements of public control that they had planned long ago as part of their 2035 Great Reset. And how about the World Health Organization stepping in and rubber stamping and mandating all of these lockdown procedures and stuff without evidence, without scientific documentation to support it? And it turns out, they're under the thumb of the Chinese Communist Party. Rather than protect the vulnerable, the elderly, and the people with comorbidities, our health professionals and our medical profession said, no, everybody's got to be locked down. You got to stay in your homes. You remember the phrase shelter at home that came into the lexicon? You've got to get vaccinated. You've got to wear a mask everywhere you go. You can't be closer than 6 feet from anybody. You can't, once a loved one goes in the hospital with a COVID diagnosis, they rush them to isolation and intubate them, and not even their loved ones can come and see them. Countless cases of husbands and wives and fathers and mothers and grandparents passing away without ever being able to see their loved ones again. As I said, traditional medical approaches like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine being outlawed. The federal government bought them up, stockpiled them so that the public couldn't get them. Known safe medications prohibited. And censorship, where the government, now we know, went in, the FBI, and other agencies of the federal government, the CIA, and pressured Facebook and Twitter and other social media giants to censor people online who were sharing so-called misinformation. People were told to turn in their neighbors and their friends who were not abiding by the lockdown and the mask mandate and everything else. 34% of small businesses in America were closed. I mean, permanently closed. They didn't recover. And I could go on and on with this, but how about the massive unemployment that followed? With people all over the country out of work, losing their jobs, not able to pay for daily necessities. So what's the government do? They come in and they spend literally trillions of dollars on unemployment benefits, on handouts to businesses, on all kinds of things like this to alleviate the financial strain supposedly of COVID. Meanwhile, taking our nation from basically an unsustainable level of debt to an absolutely fatal level of debt. Our national debt now stands at $36 trillion. Recently, the Trump administration put out a new webpage with a report called Lab Leak, The True Origins of COVID-19. This is on the web right now. I encourage every one of you to go and read this thing. It shows that the director of the National Institute of Health, Dr. Fauci, lied. He lied about masks. He lied about social distancing. He lied about the vaccines being safe and effective. He lied about just about everything. It shows that the Biden administration obstructed efforts of Congress to investigate and to get information and answers on the situation. It showed that the National Institutes of Health paid for gain-of-function research in China. This document just posted by the Trump administration shows that there was no science behind the mask mandate or the social distancing. Do you know Joe Biden, as one of his last acts as president of the United States, pardoned Fauci? Guys, I have a special guest with us today to talk about this, someone who was in an incredibly unique position to know. This individual, let me preface this by saying one of the tragedies that happened in the government response was that the Department of Defense under Joe Biden mandated, from the very top, mandated that every single man and woman in uniform in the United States military, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, had to take the dangerous COVID vaccine, the untested shot. And that if they didn't, they would be severely punished, reprimanded, and even discharged. That they would lose their retirement, they would lose their rank. And this happened to thousands of U.S. servicemen and women who said, that thing is dangerous, untested, unproven. And I think it's also part of a larger wicked scheme, and I don't want to be a part of it. And they were kicked out of the Army, kicked out of the Navy. Well, our guest today is Lieutenant Colonel retired Pete Chambers, MD. Pete joined the Army in 1983. After his first honorable discharge, having served under Ronald Reagan and I think George W. Bush, he left the Army and in the private sector, he went to med school. He became a board-certified emergency room physician. After 9/11, he joined the Army again, and they sent him to Special Forces training. He became actually a Green Beret. He served in the United States Army as a flight surgeon for Special Forces on multiple deployments all over the globe, including combat, receiving the Purple Heart for injuries he sustained in combat. He retired again from the Army and was serving in the National Guard. He was deployed as the highest-ranking Army medical personnel for a 6,000-man detachment that was assigned to the United States southern border under Joe Biden. You're going to hear from Dr. Chambers as he talks about how he realized that the COVID vaccine was neither safe nor effective, and that it was his duty under Army regulations and under the Code of Ethics for doctors to inform the men and women serving under his command the pros and cons, the risks and benefits of this COVID vaccine, and to treat them with safe and effective techniques. You're going to hear him talk about how the men under his authority did not get sick from COVID because he was treating it in advance. Those who came into his command, having already received the vaccine, are the ones that got COVID. In refusing to give the so-called vax, without informed consent, he came under the wrath of the United States Army, under military officers who were ordering him to give it, who were threatening him with censure, reprimand, and other things. Eventually, he left the Army and went into private ministry down at the border, where he's been serving since then. And he's going to share his perspective, his knowledge as a medical professional, but also what he's seen at the U.S. southern border. This is a Truth and Liberty show that you will not want to miss. I promise you that. So I'd say turn on your recorder, but you don't need to these days. We archive all our videos. You can always gain access to it. But we're going to take a little break here for about 90 seconds, and we'll be right back with Dr. Pete Chambers. Before we go, though, I wanted to tell you about our special gift. Available for free is my booklet called The Calling to Manhood. God has called all men everywhere to be a man. And that calling consists of a calling to work, a calling to lead, and a calling to fight. Get this booklet for free at our website at truthandlibertygtn.com, and we'd love for you to have it. Also, I've got a new book out called Faith for America. This is available beginning May 9th. You can get this for $5. Just go on our website at truthandliberty.net, and you can pick up yours today. All right, folks, so don't go away. We'll be right back in about 90 seconds with Dr. Pete Chambers. Are you passionate about standing for truth in the culture, but don't know how to get started? Well, Truth and Liberty, our mission is to educate, unify, and mobilize the body of Christ to stand for truth in the public square. And as part of our mission, we provide you with an amazing array of resources on our website. And our website has just been revamped, remodeled, and retooled to be user-friendly. And I'm so excited about it because I believe that there's nothing like it out there anywhere. I want to encourage you today to go to truthandliberty.net and check out the Resources Center and the Get Equipped Center. On our Resources Center, you will find hundreds of links, hundreds of videos, articles, blogs, even America's original founding documents can be found on Truth and Liberty's Resources Center. It's searchable by topic, preset topic, or you can put in a custom search to find exactly what you need and what you're interested in. In the Get Equipped section, we link you to tools created by our strategic partners, including Pray, Vote, and Engage tools. We culture impact teams, civic action teams, biblical citizenship in modern America, biblical worldview training, and more. So go today to truthandliberty.net and find what you need to get equipped to stand for truth in the public square. All right, everybody, we're back now after that short break, and I'm really excited today to have as a special guest retired Lieutenant Colonel Pete Chambers, who also is a medical doctor. So Pete Chambers, MD, he's got so many letters after his name, we're going to run out of the alphabet pretty soon. But Doc Chambers, thank you so much for coming on Truth and Liberty today.
Great to be here, Richard. It's an honor, honestly.
Well, thank you, sir. I know that you have a lot of important things you're working on, so it's great to have you with us. I just want to say that I've read your bio, and you have a fascinating background, really sort of a combination between medicine, military service, and even law enforcement. Can you just share a little bit with our viewers about your path, in the military and then also becoming a doctor?
Sure, real quick. Came in the Army in 1983. Ronald Reagan was the president. I was an infantry guy, just 18-year-old kid with a rifle. And I spent about 10 years total time in between active and reserve, went into the inactive reserve right after that. Nothing spectacular, just served my time, got out. But I stayed in the reserves and then became a physician. The reason was my dad was a small town doctor. I just kind of naturally gravitated toward that stuff. But I love my military. I love the law enforcement side of the house. I became a reserve deputy sheriff in my small town, 5,000 people, more of a, we call it a peace officer where I'm from. That was my job, was enforce the peace, not so much, keep people in line with the law, because sometimes that gets out of control. But, what 9/11 happened, it changed everything for me, because I realized I had to get back in and help. I was a trauma guy, an ER guy, emergency medicine. And I got assigned to the Special Forces, which, then took me on a different path. And they sent me to the Green Beret School, the first doctor to go to the Green Beret School, which was rare. But we got 5 through since I got through, so a total of 6. And that was a whole different world to be downrange and also be with the best people in the world doing the hardest job, and very little glory for those kind of things. You don't ever hear about those kind of missions, but they are the best people in the world. And they deserve the best care on the X, we call it, where bad things happen. So that's where I was. And Had a wonderful career. I enjoyed it. I left in 2015, left active duty, left Fort Bragg, came back to Texas, and went to the Texas National Guard. And that's when COVID kicked off, right? 2020. But, I was in the Guard doing my Guard job, which we respond to, hurricanes, things like that. We protect the border. Definitely involved in that for the past several years. And then in 2022, I went ahead and I wasn't forced out. A lot of people think I was forced out, the ones that followed me, that don't listen to the story. The real story is when COVID came along, the mandate, and this was in 2021, I believe it was August, August 24th, actually, 2021, the mandate came to the military and said, you must vaccinate everyone. And at that point, I already knew that there was something wrong with this thing. I did informed consents per the Army regulations, and nobody was taking the shots. I had the largest deployment of troops on the U.S. border since around the time of the Spanish-American War. So we're talking a long time, and a lot of troops, a long time since we've had that many. And my job was to take care of them. And when I saw that that it was ineffective, the shot was ineffective, that it was dangerous, and that we could do it by lesser intrusive means, which means preventative medicine, nasal swabs with betadine if you come in contact with somebody sick on the border. And listen, when we had 12,500 people coming across that border in a 24-hour period, we didn't test anybody coming across the border for anything. So I just did good Prev Med. So nobody's getting sick until they tell us you got to take the shots, right? And they being the Department of Defense. Did informed consents. My boss didn't like it, 2-star general.
Can you stop for just a second, Doc, and tell our viewers, what is this informed consent? What does that mean?
Oh, sure. Okay, so real simply, it's the good, the bad, and the ugly of any intervention in medicine, right? If I'm going to do a surgery on you, I got to tell you the complications. I could tell you the things that could go wrong. Tell you why it's needed. More importantly, for the intervention. But with regard to the vaccines, all right, I've got to know, a little bit of data, and that's why it's not good to rush vaccines through. They did. But then as I was watching it, I realized there was something wrong empirically, just, anecdotally, me looking at it on the ground. Luckily, praise the Lord for Dr. Teresa Long. She was up there in Alabama working at the flight school, and she was very astute when it came to the information side of the house, right? She had connection to the DMED data, Defense Medical Epidemiology Database. She had it. She called me and said, here, get on this website. I'm going to show you how to walk you through, and you're going to see the numbers that are coming out. And it was astronomical. These are things that when Matt Staver over at Liberty Counsel called and said, we want you guys to testify as whistleblowers, we did. And that data got into the database. So example, demyelination, which is a neurologic disorder. It was up 470%, okay, 476, I believe. Problems with carrying children to full term, up over almost 500% increase in 1 year since the shots were rolled out.
Say that number again, please. What was that?
Nearly 500% increase. Nearly. I believe it was like 480% increase.
Miscarriages is what you're saying.
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, go ahead.
Right. So myocarditis, pericarditis, above 900%.
Heart problems, right?
Heart problems, the inflammation of the heart lining is pericarditis, and the heart muscle is myocarditis. So that's an inflammation, usually due to some sort of autoimmune disorder. When we look at the problems with the vaccines that have been shown and proven to have autoimmune effects, there you go. But early on, all I had was a general telling me it's not about the science, Doc, it's about the policy, direct quote. And so, when you go up against that, there's a game called rock, paper, rank. I lost it. I was just a lieutenant colonel, right? So I had to listen to him, but in the long run, we were proved right. The mandate was dropped, but it was a chore. You're talking about a lot of lawsuits, Todd Callender with Roberts v. Austin, Matt Staver with Seals versus Lloyd Austin or DOD. It took a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort to stop that. And then the defense, the Declaration of Military Accountability. This was 231, soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines that got together and signed this letter that went to the DOD, to the higher ups, and said, "Hey, we're going to hold you accountable."
Mm-hmm. Well, man, there's so much in your answer there. Let's see if we can unpack some of this. No, it's amazing. You were serving at the time of the mandate. You were serving in the National Guard, right? You were no
Yes,
longer
sir.
in. Okay, but still, you were the assigned. Were you the highest-ranking medical officer
I was
in
the
this?
highest ranking. I was the task force surgeon.
Okay, for this detachment that's serving at the border, the southern border of the United States, right?
Operation Lone Star. Yes, sir.
Okay, and you're seeing 12 to 13,000 people a day coming across our border, right?
Sometimes as high as the typical average was about 12,000 in a week, but every once in a while you get that big push, and there would be a caravan, when the caravans came. But even then, that's just 1,250 miles of U.S. border. That's Texas. There's still more border past us. And so that's what we saw. That's what we were responsible.
That was just your little stretch. Okay.
Yes,
but and we'll talk some about immigration later, I think, because you're still serving down there in volunteer capacity. But I guess my point is that, or my question is, did the National Guard soldiers that you were responsible for, were they coming into contact with these immigrants?
Absolutely. There were times, most of the time, the Border Patrol handled it. However, you can imagine such a large swath of land that we're covering. Our guys were spread out in different listening posts, observation posts, and so they would come in contact as they crossed the river, sometimes in the thousands in an evening. Yeah, they would definitely come in contact. Every once in a while, we would have medical injuries down there with some of the people coming across, near drownings, unfortunately, heat casualties, these things. So our medics would go to work. We can't just, we do run a humanitarian outfit. We don't let people suffer. But in that case, we have to prevent ourselves. Preventative medicine is the key.
Yeah.
Prevent ourselves from getting sick.
Well, and that's where I wanted to go, because you mentioned in your answer before that you were applying standard preventative medicine techniques to the men under your care, and that people were not contracting COVID. Your guys were not getting sick.
No, the only ones that got sick were the ones that came on the border mission who had already decided to take the shots on their own before they came down.
Now, wait a second. The shot's supposed to stop COVID.
Bingo. That's a bingo.
So they get the shot, and then they're the ones that get sick.
Right. And this is the point. This was my point when this two-star general comes down and says, you will give the shots. And I had this stuff on the board, on the whiteboard. Here's my stats, right? The same thing I presented in the SEALs case. Here you go, sir. These are the percentages of people coming in for sick call. Most of them have been previously inoculated. And I think my percent inoculation rate on the border among 6,000 troops, we had about a 5 to 6% already had taken the vaccine. There's nothing I could do about that, but I could keep the rest of them from taking it.
Wow. And you were saying that you got data from Colonel Long, who, by the way, she's going to be on our show. We're honoring her at the Truth and Liberty Awards banquet. I think by the time this show airs, that will have happened, because it's this coming Friday.
She deserves it.
Well, we've only got so many awards to give out, or you'd be on that stage probably with her. But she was kind of fighting in the trenches, so to speak, with you on this issue, standing up for our uniformed men and women. And she connected you with some data from a Department of Defense medical database. And tell us again, these are reports of injury, sickness, disease, whatever, coming in to the Army, to the Navy, Air Force, Marines, from men and women on active duty. Is that right?
Correct. And so the way this works is it is to be a sentinel alarm, if you will, to say, hey, we're seeing an increase in this or that. Unfortunately, the system didn't work out that way. It was because of the efforts of Teresa Long, Sam Sigaloff, a major out in Fort Huachuca, Mark Bashaw, because of efforts like those whistleblowers who dug for the data, right? Teresa Long was the one that kicked it off, and that's was important. It was key critical to us getting that information to Senator Johnson to get the whistleblower status, because you do that on your own and you go to jail.
Mm-hmm. And these this data that you were finding was showing all these elevated rates of problems, neurological and other problems. You mentioned miscarriages and other things like that from people who got the shot, right?
Correct. So this is over a period. I've got the data right here. I can read it, some of it. From 2020 to 2021, specifically, so January to November 2021, the end of 2020. This is what we got. Chest pain, specifically chest pain alone, just as a symptom. 1,529% increase in just chest pain alone. In young people, right? Been in the Army a long time, been a soldier, and took care of soldiers from 2003 on, Iraq, the initial invasion. So I know what right looks like. And this is not typical for our younger age group. I'm 60, but I mean, for my troops, not typical. Okay, that's just chest pain alone. When we look at acute myocardial infarction, okay, now that's a diagnosis, not just symptom.
That's a
diagnosis of a heart attack, correct. From January to November of 2021, a 269% increase. That's a 2.7x rise. Not normal, right? Shouldn't have that amongst the ranks. That's just that. A pericarditis, once again, the inflammation, a 200% increase. I was telling you, here we go, strokes, cerebral infarction, strokes, 393% increase rise in the data that was given to us, but we weren't warned of it. Teresa Long got it to me and said, look at this. And she called me, Dr. Long, Lieutenant Colonel Long, she called me and she was in tears. Okay, this is the kind of people that care about their soldiers. You know, in this case, Army, we call them soldiers. And so she cares about them.
So Doc, you started giving informed consent, meaning you're advising your soldiers, here are the risks, the benefits. Do you want the shot? And if they said no, you wouldn't administer it. Is that right?
Then we just wouldn't administer it. But you know, there was a string attached with regard to the Department of Defense. If you don't take it, you'll be kicked out.
Yeah, right.
Soldiers lost pay. I lost pay. I mean, for being a whistleblower. I've been retired 2 years and still haven't gotten a retirement check because everything has got messed up in the system. So this is just,
wow.
You know, unfortunately, that's the games that passive aggressive people play in certain departments. We're getting it fixed though, but it's just going to take a while.
Well, I think we're learning that DOD has its own fair share of deep staters, you know, and so coming down from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Secretary of Defense, all the way through the ranks was the directive, thou shalt administer the shot. We don't care whether they consent or not.
That's absolutely right. I remember the day that the order came in. So we get our orders in operations orders, warning orders, and fragmentary orders. Now, the fragmentary order was subsequent to the mandate order. And the fragmentary order, the short bit to update it, from Lloyd Austin, he wrote it in a way that took the indemnity off of him. He said in small print, commanders are responsible for issuing and administering the appropriately approved vaccine. Okay, so now when we never had an appropriately approved vaccine, who's responsible? The commander's on the ground. He doesn't take the heat.
Gotcha. Wow,
I tried to tell that to commanders. I tried to tell them, like, guys, you're going to get in trouble.
You said, right, well, wait a second, this isn't appropriately approved. What makes you say it wasn't appropriately approved?
Because it was still an emergency use authorization vaccine. It was never approved.
All right.
It never existed. So we knew it was an EUA and by the Army regulations, which I read them, you know, to the colonel or the general that day. I said, here it is, our Army regulation 40-562, paragraph 8, you know, chapter 8, paragraph 2. He didn't care. He said, it's not about the science. It ain't about the regulations. It's about the policy. Got to get everybody shots. Get on the team, Doc.
Tell me about that regulation. I don't want to get too nerdy here in Code of Justice or anything. Okay. But what's this regulation, Doctor?
Okay,
Does it say?
Regulation, it's the regulations tell us how to perform our job. Essentially, they already existed. So when I had diphtheria, tetanus shots, okay, people have to update their tetanus every once in a while. They get in contact with a rusty fence or something. All right, so I have to look at the reg and say, okay, it's not an emergency use. It's not an experimental shot. It's been around for a while. I haven't seen this kind of injury from it. We can give it. But when I see this in the regulations and it says, if it's an experimental shot, they have the right to refuse. That's the key. Wow,
that's in the Army regulations already?
In the Army regulations.
I had not heard that before. That's amazing.
And that's why we saw Pete Hegseth, the current Secretary of Defense, come out last week and say, We realized that because they're trying to recruit, we realized that the last administration gave an illegal order to take the shots. This is what I told the general. This is what ultimately was my demise, is getting fired and essentially shuffled out the door. I didn't get any court martial, but that's what it is. So it's important to understand that the Secretary of Defense just came out and said that. So he admits to it. He's doing the right thing. Okay, so now we have an admission of doing the wrong thing. We need to be accountable. We need to hold those accountable. We need to make amends with those that lost pay, that were held basically in house arrest, if you will. Couldn't go to work, didn't wear a mask, didn't take the shots. You had to wear a band around your wrist. You're one of those outcast people. This is all these crazy games that went on at the operational level and down to the troops. That none of that's talked about in mainstream media, and it's unfortunate because there is a certain modicum of esprit de corps, honor, and things that come with my military that I served for 39 years in. There is that. So
literally, I mean, some of those things you're talking about, a myocardial infarction, a stroke, and these other things, we had soldiers dying from the vaccine. Is that right?
Right. Not in my watch. I didn't lose anyone, but we had a couple that were close, that were in the ICU and down in the border in the Rio Grande Valley at a heart hospital.
But across
there were
the military,
people that died. Across the board, there were definitely. We can't say an unexplained, went to sleep, didn't wake up death, and there's no autopsy allowed immediately post a vaccine or within weeks of a vaccine. I can only go causation on that, but that's not the norm. That's not the typical data or a typical symptomatology or pathology would find in this young population.
Well, the vaccines were rushed. They were not tested. Normally, it's a 2 to 5 year process to test and approve a vaccine at the FDA and National Institutes of Health and all that, I assume. That's what I've heard.
That's about right.
And the government also waived any civil liability risks for these so-called vaccine manufacturers. So, yeah, guys, go for it. Pedal to the metal. You don't have any risks at all. Just put something together so we can stop this so-called epidemic. Doc, looking at that, and then look at your experience of how this was forced on our men and women and how unreasonable that was, given the facts, given the data. Did you come to believe that there was some other agenda at work besides the well-being of our soldiers?
At the time, I wrote it off to complete incompetence, but that was in the middle of the battle, right? You're on a battlefield, you can see from your binoculars, if you will. But as I stepped out of the military and I started going out and speaking about it, and went before audiences, I was an unknown. I didn't have social media before all of this, but I had to go high order. And literally the first guy I ran into in Central Texas was Alex Jones, and I went on his show. I didn't even watch his show ever, but he had an audience and they were willing to listen. So I was able to talk about it. And then that got the ball rolling. And so as I'm meeting more people like this, we're having discussions, serious discussions. We're not talking about, I'm going to have data before I can believe something or know something. Yeah. But I also know that there's a saying in Texas that goes, if you hear a hoofbeat, you don't think about a zebra, you think about a horse, because it's most common, right? So this is what I'm looking at. So I'm thinking, okay, well, as a guy that has worked in the unconventional warfare space, if you will, right, special forces, unconventional, I have to wonder, okay, is there some other agenda? Boom. That's when you say the word agenda and you start looking at 2030, okay, or agenda 2021 at the time. You go backwards and you backtrack it, and then you look at all the acts and things that were done as we look at the history of this thing and go, well, why were there COVID vaccine patents that were made in 2016 having to do with PCR testing and all this when COVID wasn't a thing? Right. So why COVID-19 as far as the deleterious coronavirus? Coronavirus, when I graduated from medical school in 1996, was the common cold. Yeah. That's it.
Well, and some of the stuff you were referring to, folks may not be totally familiar with, but so COVID-19, one of the things that happened was from the very beginning we were being lied to. right? From the very beginning, our government was telling us this was a naturally occurring virus. And we know now that it did not originate in nature. It originated in the Wuhan lab in China, right?
The genomic sequence of this thing completely generated, completely actually found in a patent. For that patent guy to do it before it existed would be impossible to have that genomic sequence lined up. We're talking about deoxyribonucleic acid, a long strand of nucleotides, the chain of which is impossible to get exactly right. So that, yes, that's not naturally occurring.
It came to light somehow, I can't remember how, but that Dr. Fauci's team at CDC, and that they were actually funding gain-of-function research at the Wuhan lab. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, gain-of-function means they are researching and experimenting how to make a virus more deadly. Am I right?
That's a weaponization, correct.
The United States of America, our tax dollars were paying China to manufacture a vaccine that kills people all over the world.
Correct. And this is something that to me is it's treason. I mean, there's no doubt it's treason. At the minimum, it is it is reckless endangerment at the minimum, but it's not reckless endangerment because it was planned, and there were people that cashed in on this thing as well. There's always going to be the love of mammon people. You're going to be in this mix because they're always going to go on to what can I make for myself. Yeah. But the ultimate that scenario that you just described is treason, and we're aiding and abetting the enemy to go after U.S. In the world. It's the Five Eyes countries. It's U.S., Canada. It's the Great Britain, New Zealand, and Australia all came underneath this thing. You look at the rest of the world; it's not as bad in the third world countries, and we're looking at them taking ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, and when I tried to get it from my troops, they took it out of the inventory. So
all right, well, looking at talk about that for a second. That's another thing. Is we all remember how the messaging and propaganda from the entire medical profession and our public health officials and government was, don't take ivermectin, it's for horses, and don't take hydroxychloroquine, it's dangerous, unproven, untested, you can't do it. And then all of a sudden it disappears and you can't even get it. Doctors refuse to prescribe it. And those medicines have been around for years and years, completely safe. As a board certified physician, can you comment on how crazy that is, and how could that ever happen in America?
Well, yeah. How it could happen is you got a government that's in that particular HHS, which now is manned by another gentleman that I respect, Health and Human Services. They basically just came in and took those inventories and put them into the stockpile, the U.S. Defense stockpile. There was a memorandum of agreement that took place between the Department of Defense and HHS during the COVID time, because Operation Warp Speed was a DoD-driven operation, right? It's an operation.
What's Warp Speed? What's Operation Warp Speed?
The creation, the quick creation of the COVID vaccine.
All right.
Right. They weaponized. They didn't weaponize it. I don't know that the DoD did that. I won't say that, but I'll say that people that were responsible for the Fauci's and the Ralph Barrick, they're responsible. So you've got this thing that's going on in the background. The same time, you also have this, if you mention the word hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin, at my level, I was told to leave meetings if there was anybody in there from HHS. I was told, don't talk about that, doctor. I'm using it on the border for my troops. And honestly, I had to get local stockpiles and keep them, personally pay for it to give to my troops, or have other people bring it in so we can give it to them if they did get sick. And then they did fine. Right?
Wow.
So
amazing.
Ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. Matter of fact, in Africa, when I was stationed there, we were using it as a preventative for malaria. I never had one problem with it. No side effects.
Doc, our founder, Andrew Womack, he served in the Army in Vietnam. He said that back then they were giving them the hydroxychloroquine as pills. They give you a fistful of them and say, here, take this so you don't get malaria.
Exactly right. Same thing we did. Yeah. Same thing.
Well, and, so the other thing you alluded to, I've got so much I want to talk to you about today, but the other thing is you mentioned the project, I think you said 2020 or 2030 or whatever. I think you're referring to the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset.
Correct.
Okay, so what I remember is the World Economic Forum. They're the ones behind the so-called Great Reset, and they came out after COVID broke pretending that it was some surprise to them, said, well, this is a great opportunity, actually.
Oh, yeah, it is.
And then you have the World Health Organization, UN, who begins to dictate all of this crazy lockdown stuff and gets behind mandatory vaccines and everything else. And it turns out they're under the control of the Communist Party in China. So what do you think about all that?
Oh, absolutely. This is something I watched very closely after I got into this fight. The World Health Organization, which we used to fund heavily, which in the beginning, I believe it was Bill Gates was one of the top contributors to the World Health Organization. Their job is and was and is to put the word out for the next pandemic around the corner, right? As COVID, they realized we're not going to let a good disaster go to waste. And that's what they did. So here they come and they say, now the next, PHEIC, Pandemic Health Emergency of International Concern. So we make it sound real important and we say, okay, here it comes. It's Ebola. Oh, that didn't work. Here it comes. It's Marburg. Oh, that didn't work. Here it comes. It's avian. Oh, that didn't work. Here it comes. It's, what was that, Zika virus. That didn't work. You know what Zika virus was? It was just a side effect to I believe it was, they were doing some medication for birth control or something like that. I can't remember where Zika came from, but they were having the kids with the microcephaly, the small heads that were being born. Okay,
Wow.
So this is a side effect to a medication, but they called it a virus. Pandemic Health Emergency of International Concern. Let's scare people. So their number one tactic is fear.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
It's always going to be fear.
Well, and it was scary. People were catching COVID and were dying and all this sort of stuff. But one of the things from the pandemic that people need to remember is how traditional approach to pandemics and public health, things like this, all got turned on its head. Instead of identifying the at-risk population and isolating them or protecting them, we isolated the entire population with this lockdown theory, these mandatory masks and all this other stuff. And people who were at, young, healthy men, they could catch COVID-19 and, it's a severe cold, but after that, you're pretty much over it.
Right.
But the obese, the people with heart conditions, the elderly and so forth, they're the ones, but how did that all happen to? Is that more of the corruption, do you think, that this just, no one was questioning it, it just got handed down as a dictate?
Yeah, so it was a if we're looking at an agenda, something that was planned, we have to look at the other attack vectors upon the nation. One on our food, right? The quality of our food. One on the the expansion of the disease diabetes, which was caused by, right, our food problems. You look at what I ate in school as a young schooler. When I went through the line, I got some beans and a piece of steak or something or whatever. Now you get just carbohydrates. So you create this poisoned, heavy, sick society.
Yeah.
And then you attack them with something, a gain of function virus that then goes after people with comorbidities, right? So that was the ones that you were worried about. And so then you also use the fear tactics. So during the COVID, when the initial data was coming out, giving you the estimates as to how many people were going to die, that was a pretty scary thing, right? You'd see, oh my gosh, in the state of Texas, we're going to have 1 million people dead in the first year. I was right there in the center of it in Austin watching this and these fear tactics, and they would come in and say, this is how many going to die. But then you'd look and they would only report 700 deaths in a year of the traditional flu, right? Influenza. But yet the year before that, there were 30,000 deaths of influenza. How is it that year there were only 700 deaths?
Well, people stopped catching cold. That's what it was, right?
Yes. Yeah. So you look at this, it all goes down to fear. So now when you see these coming out, I'm proud of so many people because they've we call it getting red pilled. A lot of people call it that, but they're becoming enlightened to the fact that these fear tactics are not going to work on most of our society, I believe, now. Well, the people that are listening.
So, Doc, there's so much more we could talk about. What I want to do before I lose you, because I still want to talk about immigration a little bit and what it's like down there at the border, and we're kind of running out of time. But has anybody been held to account for all this that you know of in the military?
None.
Nobody's been discharged. Nobody's been court-martialed. There's been, even at the highest levels, no one has been
not over the egregious events, not over that side. There have been people that have been court-martialed and jailed and treated pretty bad that stood up and said they wouldn't take it, but that hasn't happened yet.
Right.
Not as far as righting the wrongs.
So you mentioned this declaration. I forget the full name of it.
Military accountability.
Declaration of Military Accountability. Has that been served? Have you delivered that to the Joint Chiefs or whoever? That
was by the group that initiated it. You can go to declarationofmilitary.accountability.net and you can look it up, and it's there. It's a beautiful. It's like a Declaration of Independence, if you will.
Yeah, but do you know whether Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth are planning to hold anybody accountable for the mandatory shot tyranny that took place?
Yeah, I don't have anything absolute, but I can say that I'm seeing leanings with the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Hegseth. I'm seeing him lean towards that because he's listening in that he just came out and said, okay, I understand that was an illegal order. That's good. Now we got to follow up with, if you did something egregious, time to go. But I'm watching also they're changing things around at the Department of Defense with regard to general officers. Some of those are being either told to retire or fired. And that's a good thing because some of those that they've done were the most egregious. So maybe that's what's happening in the background without them telling us.
Well, and time is away from us. I want to ask you about all the men and women who were discharged or injured from the vaccine in the military, or who lost rank, lost pay, lost retirement benefits, everything else, and what we're doing to help them. But we'll have to save that for another show. Let's switch gears, if we can, Doc, to this subject of immigration. So you've been down there on the border for years now, and tell us. Let's just start with, we talked a little bit about how many illegals were coming over, but how bad was it down there before President Trump?
Right. Like I said, 12,000, 13,000 a week was a typical number for Texas, 1,250 miles, about average. You would have about 900 to 1,000 coming across a specific point a night. Overwhelms the system. There's only 2 or 3 of us per listening post, observation post. You've got to then get them to the road so that CPS, or not CPS, so that Border Patrol can come and pick them up. They then take them to a station where they administratively bring them into the system and give them a court date to follow up in several years. It was ridiculous. It was overwhelmed. It disheartened, demoralized the Border Patrol, demoralized the soldiers. But the difference now is we're seeing maybe on an average day in the state of Texas, which was how it was before, between 40 and 100 reported coming across the border in a day, at the height 100. So that's manageable, right, for our system of immigration. But that before, it was like looking for the bad guys, the terrorists. It was like looking for a needle in a stack of needles. Honestly, you couldn't imagine just trying to sift out the numbers coming across. It's manageable now. So we decreased the amount of troops that we have on the border. The active duty brought in troops, which is great. That helps Texas out. I give kudos to Mr. Hegseth, specifically Mr. Homan, the border czar. I've had conversation with him. He's doing a good job. I think he could use some more help, but I'm an armchair quarterback. I don't sit at the strategic level.
So you were serving in the National Guard at the border, and then you said you got fired, right? And so what did you do after that?
Oh, so I'm doing what I'm doing now. We started a small team of rugged individuals that like being on the border and working on our tans, riding horses. But we also we do humanitarian relief for people on this side and on the Mexican side with regard to orphans. We work on counter human trafficking. So we are the people that find those individuals if we can and turn them over to authorities or to teams that are authorized to go and rescue those kids and women. And then we are an association of ministry. So we are technically a 508c1a ministry that we associate with ministries all the way across the country now. We were in North Carolina during that debacle with the hurricane and stayed there for 3 weeks on the ground. And we, total time. And so we were able to lend a hand there. We've made some friends all the way up to the director of FEMA now, which is a good friend, Cameron Hamilton, good guy. He's taken over. It's his job to either dismantle it or fix it. And I believe he's doing a good job. So we've been blessed. We've been able to work hard.
Are you guys actually sharing the gospel with folks down there on the border?
Absolutely.
That are coming over?
That's we operate in a kingdom mindset. So our thing is, yeah, I was a Green Beret, I was this, but my identity as Christ sees me or as God sees me, that's the only one that really matters. So
Amen.
those things prepared me for the moments such as this, no problem. But now the identity is a kingdom mindset. And so my identity personally is as a centurion. If you tell me it, sir, God, I believe it, and we'll do it. And I take orders directly from my new commander in chief, which I should have been all along, but it's just, a paradigm shift for us.
When did you find the Lord, brother?
About 30 years old, I really gave my heart, but the refinement process has been a go. Multiple deployments in between there and now. You kind of live through pity parties of, oh, poor me, I just went to war. But nobody gives a free ticket on hardship. Christ went through a pretty hard time and still saved us.
Yeah. So when you're down there, you were seeing actual human trafficking take place, including young children.
Absolutely. When I was in uniform, I saw it. Nothing I could do about it other than hand them over to Border Patrol. Now I can make sure that they don't become part of the system that lost them, right? There were 386,000, I believe, that have been, that they talk about missing. These are unaccompanied minors. I believe it's more like 500,000 unaccompanied minors that were missing from the border. So where are they?
Dear Lord, that is unbelievable. That is unbelievable.
And this is over, the whole Biden administration, but still, and into a lot of it.
I've only got two minutes left. Did you also find drug trafficking, illegal drug trafficking, and mules and all that kind of stuff?
Yes, we saw that every night. I mean, you could see that happening, and we would report those, and they would make the interdictions. Yes, personally, I've witnessed several walking through the woods. We held them at bay, and they had fentanyl with them, handed over to the Texas Department of Public Safety. But yeah, we do see that. Yeah.
Well, and now it's the night and day difference, I guess, under Donald Trump. I guess the Democrats were wrong. We didn't need a new immigration law. We just need to enforce what we had on the books.
Enforce the ones we got. That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, Doc, I just want to thank you for coming on Truth and Liberty. It's been a fascinating discussion. I want to have you back because we want to dive into some more of these details because we just kind of scratched the surface today.
We just pulled the scab back a little bit. But you know what? Bringing the president coming in has put a tourniquet on the wounds. Now we got to work on the 1,000 tiny cuts, and we're getting there.
Well, absolutely. Amen. And how can people learn more about what you're doing?
Sure. The Remnant Ministry TX for Texas.org. You can go there and catch up with what we're doing and become part of our team. We have an auxiliary team that helps us out. Some people financially, but prayer warriors. It's amazing. This is a all hands on deck, and it's we the people, and I love it.
Yeah. So you're not a bunch of vigilantes going down there and shooting up on the border and causing trouble.
You don't need a gun.
You're supporting and helping the military and law enforcement that are already there.
The only sword I got is the Bible.
Oh, amen. Praise God. Doc Pete Chambers, thanks for coming on Truth and Liberty today. Folks, I want to remind you about our free product giveaway. It's my booklet, The Calling to Manhood. You can get this by going to truthandlibertygtn.com, truthandlibertygtn.com. It's yours for free today. But I also want to tell you about my new booklet called Faith for America. I'm telling you, this will light your fire. You need to get it on May 9th. Thanks so much for watching our show today, everybody. We'll be back again next time here with more from Truth and Liberty.